There was a young woman named Rini in rural Indonesia in 1981. She lives with her father Bahri, grandmother Rahma, and 3 younger brothers, Tony, Bondi, and Ian. Ian, the youngest, is mute, so the family uses sign language to communicate with him. Rini's mother, Mawarni Suwono, was once a famous singer, but is now bedridden with a mysterious illness. She has a bell to ring when she needs help. Rini, Tony, and their father take care of her. Mawarni is chanting in an ancient language. The 1980s were a time of vinyl records, and Rini meets with her mother's agent, who tells her that the records aren't selling, radio stations aren't paying royalties, and her mother hasn't produced a new song in 3 years. The family is in dire financial straits, with Bari even mortgaging their house to pay for Mawarni's treatment, though her condition continues to worsen. One night, Rini hears her mother's bell ringing and finds her staring at an empty space in her room. She calms her down by taking the ring from her hand. Later, Tony gives their father the money he earned from selling his bike, whereas Bondi shares a superstition he learned from his religious teacher. When the last family member of a deceased person walks 40 steps away from the tomb, the dead rise again for a few minutes before dying for good. But Rini dismisses this as nonsense. The family doesn't pray, as they are atheists, while Tony is combing his mother's hair. Later at night, the next day, they hold a funeral with the help of the spiritual leader, Ustads. After the funeral, Ustads' son Hendra introduces himself. Bondi stops at the 39th step from the grave, asking Rini what will happen if their mother rises again. Rini tells him not to bother about superstitions and takes him home. Villagers gather at Rini's house to pray. Bondi is terrified as the graveyard is right across from their home, and he can even look at it from his bed. His father tries to calm him down before leaving town for a few days, leaving Rini in charge. Without cell phones, the siblings worry about emergencies. Bondi, unable to sleep due to fear, sees a man searching for something in the graveyard with a torch. Meanwhile, Tony hears his mother's bell ringing. But when he checks, it's ringing in mid-air before falling to the ground. Terrified, he ran back to his room. As their father had left for a few days, Bondi skipped school. Paranormal activities begin in their house. Rini sees the image of a woman near their well, and Bondi sees the pale woman in his toy. Ian plays hide-and-seek with their grandmother, who is in a wheelchair and can't walk due to asthma. Ian finds her, making her happy. One night, Tony hears his mother's voice coming from the radio, calling him to comb her hair. He shouts at the radio, but the voice continues. He hears the scary voice of a woman. At midnight, Ian is found standing in front of a room. When Bondi asks what's wrong, Ian points to their mother's portrait, saying it's scary. Bondi throws a white curtain over the portrait, but it stops in mid-air, forming a human shape. Whatever is there attacks. When Rini arrives, Bondi tells her that their mother's ghost attacked them, but when Rini looked, the white curtain was on her mother's portrait. Rini calms them down. Tony places his mother's bell and comb near her grave, wishing for peace. Hendra later tells Rini that he saw a mysterious woman during the funeral who wasn't from their village. He even checked the graveyard that night and found nothing suspicious, which means Bondi must have seen Hendra earlier. However, Hendra reveals that he saw the same pale woman again in their house. He believes an evil spirit has taken the form of their mother and that the house is haunted. Rini dismisses his concerns, attributing them to superstition, but Hendra insists that he is more open-minded than his father, Ustad. Despite his warnings, Rini refuses Hendra's offer to stay at his house. Soon after, Rini's grandmother is seen walking on her own, despite being wheelchair-bound. Rini then hears a loud scream of Biondi and runs to find her grandmother's body in the well. Bondi, who discovered the body first, is deeply traumatized. Rini finds a letter from her grandmother addressed to a man named Budiman. Rini and Hendra visit Budiman, who reveals that he and the grandmother were once close, but she married his friend. He explains that the grandmother disapproved of Rini's parents' marriage due to her mother's inability to conceive, which strained their relationship. He also mentions that the grandmother suspected Rini's mother of praying to Satan for children. Rini doesn't believe this, but Budiman gives her an article he wrote, suggesting she read it to understand more. A blind man interrupts, reminding Budiman of his massage appointment. That night, Bondi, in his sleep, mutters that he won't kill Ian because he loves him. When Rini checks on him, he appears to be in a state of possession and isolation. But Rini and Tony believe that he is shocked by their grandmother's death. However, Bondi, while sleeping, signals to Ian that he will kill him, frightening the boy. Ian, already scared, hears a voice at midnight and follows it. The next day, Rini finds her mother's vinyl record and plays it backward, revealing a chant in an ancient language. She later finds Ian hiding outside in a small box, having slept there out of fear. Rini brings him inside and reassures him that they are all together. After the incident, Tony confronts Rini about the book she got from the old man. He reveals that according to the article, their mother wasn't pregnant by their father, but by different members of a satanic cult. Tony confirms this is true, pointing out how all the siblings look distinctly different from one another. He adds that, as a child, he often accompanied their mother to her events when she was still a singer. At these events, strange individuals would visit their mother, seemingly there to watch over her. Tony, after reading the article, tells Rini that women who cannot conceive sometimes join a demonic cult that grants them children, but with a catch. When the youngest child turns 7, he must be given to the cult. He points out that Rini is 22, he is 16, Bondi is 10, and Ian will turn 7 in 3 days. As the article says, that living dead arrive to take a child when they turn 7, but only if the family voluntarily allows it. Rini dismisses this as superstition. While Rini is giving Ian breakfast, her grandmother's chair moves on its own, and Rini sees her grandmother's crying image on the glass, scaring her. Ustad checks the house and confirms the presence of an evil spirit, advising them to pray to Allah. As Rini prepares to pray, she again sees the White Lady. Meanwhile, in another room, Ian and Bondi are sleeping when their door suddenly opens. Scared by it, he covers his face with the blanket. As Rini prays, the white zombie lady hovers around her. When Rini finishes praying, the White Lady attacks her. Terrified, Rini takes everyone and runs to Ustad's house. The next day, Hendra receives a call from Budiman asking to meet. Hendra goes alone, and Budiman hands him a new article. He plays a tape loudly and whispers something in Hendra's ear, blocking any evil spirits from overhearing their conversation. However, on his way back, Hendra faces a tragic accident and dies instantly. At Budiman's house, a blind man arrives unexpectedly. Budiman tries to shoo him away with a stick, suspecting he might be a member of the cult. Meanwhile, Bondi is ready to attack with a knife, but Rini takes it from him just in time. Later, villagers bring Hendra's body to the village, and his funeral is conducted in disbelief. Rini finds a letter from Budiman among Hendra's belongings. That night, Hendra's ghost tries to drag Rini from her house, but Tony and Ian help her. Ustads, devastated, offers no help. Their father arrives, and Rini tells him everything, shocking him, especially about his mother's death. He decides they will leave the house the next day. Rini asks what he said to their mother before she died, and he confesses that he might have encouraged her to end her suffering. Suddenly, Tony shouts for help as Ian is locked in the bathroom. When they open the door, they see a figure trying to drag Ian into the well. Their father jumps in to save him, encountering ghostly creatures. Cult members, referred to as Satan's slaves, surround the house. The family locks the doors, but paranormal activities intensify. A wheelchair is thrown at Rini, Tony, and their father, trapping them in a room, leaving Ian and Bondi alone. Bondi snaps out of his possession and tries to rescue Ian, and when he touches Ian, the evil power vanishes. Their father, armed with a steel rod, confronts the cult members, declaring he will not give away any of his children. As the cult members retreat, they throw something around the house. The next day, the family prepares to leave the village, planning a surprise birthday party for Ian at midnight. Ustads arrives, apologizing for his earlier inaction. While walking around the house, Rini notices red seeds scattered everywhere. By evening, the taxi they were expecting still hadn't arrived. Ustad stays with them, but suddenly the electricity goes out. Rini recalls Hendra's letter and reads it, discovering that the red seeds are meant to awaken the living dead, surrounding the devil's child on his 7th birthday. She realizes that grandmother's ghost has been trying to protect them from Ian, who is the devil's son. Later that night, Rini sees the White Lady entering their father's room, and he also sees the White Lady lying next to him, causing him to flee to his children's room. After midnight, Ian starts speaking, revealing that he was never mute. He confesses to Bondi that he was speaking to his friends and laughs menacingly. Bondi then sees living dead ghosts outside the window, and Ustads identifies them as jinns. The ghosts kill Ustads, and Hendra's ghost is among them. They see Ian outside with the ghosts, who then ask his father to join him. Ian reveals he was never their son, but the devil's child, which is why Mawarti's health deteriorated. The cult knew she was trying to cheat them, so they decided to take the child by force. Tony drags their father inside, but the ghosts attack again. They all see grandmother's ghost stopping the creatures. She only wanted to kill Ian because she knew he was the devil's son. Budiman arrives and rescues the family, explaining that Ian was never their child. The movie then jumps to a year later, where the family is living in an apartment. A neighbor brings them food, then tells her husband they need to find new victims. He replies that they need to take better care of them this time, so they can't escape. As satanic music plays, they dance, revealing a jar full of red seeds, indicating they are the cult leaders. The movie ends with a shot of an Indonesian map marked with the locations of victims and followers.